repetitive and instead just focus maybe on U.S. or potential U.S.-Argentina cooperation. First, a word about where I come from, right? Because where you sit matters, depends on where you stand depends on where you sit. As Lisa mentioned, I'm from our Energy Resources Bureau in the State Department, and you might ask, why do we have an Energy Resources Bureau in a foreign ministry? We're the only foreign ministry in the world that has one. And it's really a recognition of the intersection between our national security and our foreign policy. I think national security, if you look at some key critical goals under that umbrella, political stability, economic growth and prosperity, and our climate goals, all three of those depend on our energy policy and getting our energy mix right. And it's why the State Department has an entire bureau dedicated to energy resources. And I think that what we've seen during President Macri's tenure so far in his actions and his words is a recognition of exactly that fact, that getting the energy picture right is going to be critical to Argentina's future economic growth, political stability, and its climate goals. And so it's a real pleasure. As the ambassador said, you know, the current situation presents opportunities and challenges, and I think that I want to focus for a few minutes on the opportunities because I think they're real, and I think it's going to change the picture significantly over the next decade. I think when we're sitting here talking about Argentina in 10 years from now, it's going to be a radically different conversation. So starting with, I mean, we've talked a lot already about what the president has done with the establishment of a new ministry, applying qualified minister who is dedicated to reforming the energy sector, reducing subsidies, increasing the incentives for private investment, all of the steps that have already been taken. The question is then, now that you start taking those steps, how do you really move the process forward? And we have several initiatives in Latin America, the State Department, the U.S. government does, focused on energy sector reform. One is our Caribbean Energy Security Initiative, which I think I've talked about here before, at the dialogue. We also have the Caribbean and Central American Energy Task Force, but we also have bilateral initiatives with Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and now I think we'll be entering a new era of significant energy cooperation with Argentina. The Vice President and President Macri had a very good conversation in Davos last month where energy was an important part of the conversation, and they agreed on the importance of getting the energy mix right for our climate goals, leadership on renewable integration, and the potential for increased natural gas production in Argentina. The President, as we already mentioned, is going out there next week, and energy will definitely be a focus of the President's agenda and conversation when he's in Argentina. Will be part of the conversation. And finally, last in January, my boss, our special envoy for energy, Almas Hochstein, had a very good conversation with Energy Minister Aranguren, and we followed that conversation up by sending a delegation of experts down to Argentina in January to look at where we might cooperate. And I think if I could maybe just talk about three specific areas where I see U.S., at least from the State Department's perspective. Let me mention, too, that it's not just a new era of cooperation between the State Department and Argentinian energy. Clearly, our Department of Energy and our EPA will also have new, I think, initiatives and cooperation, but I'm just going to speak from the State Department's perspective. So I want to talk about three areas in particular. The first is looking at renewable energy integration and the power sector. And we've already talked today a little bit about some of the challenges with integrating renewables. Argentina has enormous potential, above ground and below ground. The above ground is wind and solar, small hydro, but you can't just turn on the switch and start, as we all know, start cranking up new wind farms and solar farms and integrate them into your grid and have it work perfectly. You have to design effective auctions. You have to put in place the right kind of incentives that don't discourage investment. You have to make sure your grid is resilient, and you can integrate renewables without, with having a firm a firm base load to allow for the intermittent generation. But you also need to be able to shave off peak production that's the most costly and often the dirtiest. All of this takes real technical capacity, and I think that there are some areas where U.S. and Argentina can really work together, both I think Argentina has much to offer because of its own resource potential, but we also have a lot of experience from some of our integration of renewables over the last 10 years. Looking at our climate objectives, I applaud President Macri and commitment to, he has said he wants to even revise and have more ambitious goals than what Argentina committed to in the run-up to the Paris Agreement. We're trying to do the same thing. We have an ambitious agenda. We are looking at, through the Clean Power Plan, the President's Clean Power Plan, even increasing our solar and wind generation more than we already have. We've doubled wind and tripled solar over the last 5 or 8 years. We've put in place longer tax incentives. We have the Clean Power Plan that will deal with old and new power plants. But as we work to do that, we have some of the similar challenges that Argentina has, and I think working together in those areas offers a real potential for both of us. And that's one area that I hope the President will be able to discuss next week. But the worst thing for me to do would be to preempt what the President's going to say next week. So I'll leave it to, please stay tuned for his visit and look at what he announces next week. So that's the power sector and renewable integration. The second area is unconventional gas development, and I do urge you to read the report that Lisa and Jed co-authored. It's excellent, and I couldn't agree more. We should be sharing best practices, and in fact, our Bureau has a program called the Unconventional Gas Technical Engagement Program. It's an extremely unfortunate acronym of UGTEP. That under that program, we do exactly that. We don't advocate, it's not the United States' position to tell another country this should be your energy mix, right? Our policy is all of the above. We have important hydrocarbons, renewables, energy efficiency measures, nuclear. Every country decides its own mix. But if you're going to develop your unconventional resources, then here's what we've learned over the last decade, and we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about how to work with local communities. We've learned a lot about environmental best practices. We've learned a lot about how to structure concession agreements, how to deal with competing laws and regulations between local communities, provinces, and federal governments. And we've developed a cadre of experts that we have used in conferences, seminars, and technical exchanges around the world to do exactly that, share best practices. I think it's an excellent program, and it really does provide an objective, sort of neutral, pro or con view on, if you're going to do this, here's what we learned about doing it right. And it's an area where I'd love to see cooperation between Argentina and the United States going forward, in an area where we're certainly prepared to do more over the next decade. And the third area, and then I'll wrap up so we have time for questions, and you already alluded to this, Ambassador, but it's with the participation of U.S. companies. On the renewable side, on the hydrocarbon side, U.S. companies have some of the most advanced, cleanest, safest technology on the planet, and we would love to see more U.S. company participation in unconventional gas development in Argentina, in the hydrocarbon sector more broadly, and in wind, solar, small hydro. We would love to see that, and it's certainly an area where we're working already on increasing business-to-business